Good evening. Thanks for joining us for our special election coverage on our Local 12 digital platforms. I'm Megan Mongello.
And I'm Adam Clements. The polls are officially closed in Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana, and the results are coming in. We do have team coverage following all the key races and issues. Let's start with the big one, the race for the White House. Here's a look at the current results in the presidential race. Still too close, only 9% reporting at this point. Donald Trump with 20%. Vice President Kamala Harris with 19.3 million. But again, still so many states left to report. Trump has already claimed victory in both Indiana and Kentucky. He's watching the results with an inner circle at his home, Mar-a-Lago in Florida. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris is at her alma mater, Howard University, where she's holding her election night watch party. She says the HBCU has shaped her into the person she is today.
You may remember from civics class, the popular vote doesn't determine the outcome. It's determined by the Electoral College, which is complicated and confusing. So we want to give you a breakdown of how it works. State political parties choose their electors. Each state gets the same number as it has members in the House and Senate, and the District of Columbia gets 3 for a total of 538. A candidate needs a majority, so at least 270. That's the magic number to win. On Election Day, votes go into a statewide tally, with 48 states using a winner-takes-all electoral vote system. A winner projected is typically announced on election night or soon after, but the Electoral College vote, when the electors meet in their states, is in mid-December. The Constitution doesn't require electors to vote for their party's nominee, but they almost always do. Some states do require it.
Well, voters in Indiana have chosen a new governor. Republican Mike Braun is being declared the winner. He defeated Democrat Jennifer McCormick, a former Republican who split with the party, and Donald Rainwater, who ran as the Libertarian candidate. Take a look. You can see Braun with 55% of the vote, McCormick 40%, and then Rainwater just 5% there. That is with 55% reporting. Now, Braun will succeed Republican Eric Holcomb, who can't run again because of term limits. With Braun leaving the U.S. Senate to take the governor's seat, that creates an opening there. Republican Jim Banks, Libertarian Andrew Horning, and Democrat Valerie McCrae are all vying to fill that open spot. Here's a look at the results. Again, 56% reporting. You have Banks with 60% of the vote right now, leading handily. Valerie McCrae, 38% of the vote, and Andrew Horning with 3% of the vote. Finally, Republican Erin Houchin is seeking a second term in Congress. She's facing challenges from Democrat Tim Peck and Libertarian Russell Brooksbank. You can see Houchin, 64% of the vote, 33% for Peck, and then Brooksbank just 2% of the vote with 48% of the.
Is watching a local race that could determine which party controls the U.S. Senate. The battle is tight between Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown and Bernie Moreno. Results are coming in right now. We want to put up the results so you can see what's happening. Behind me, you can see at this point 49% for Bernie Moreno and 48% for Sherrod Brown. That's only 18% reporting, so still a long way to go throughout the night. Our James Pilcher is live in Columbus with the Brown campaign. And James, what is the mood there right now?
Well, I would say that it's cautiously optimistic, and this ballroom is where actually both Sherrod Brown's campaign and the Ohio Democratic Party as a whole have teamed up to watch the results come in, as you said, for this hotly contested race. Now, if Brown wins tonight and serves out his term, he'd be the longest serving U.S. Senator in Ohio history. The veteran incumbent Democrat and his Republican Bernie Moreno didn't hold any debates and only did a few interviews. Polls had this as a statistical dead heat, even though Moreno is a political newcomer, and Brown had at one point been mentioned as a possible running mate for Joe Biden in 2020. That's as Brown has remained one of the lone Democrats in statewide office, and Moreno got the endorsement of former President Trump. Brown campaigned heavily on his pro-abortion stance, saying Moreno's anti-abortion stance is extreme, especially after Ohio voters protected reproductive rights with a new constitutional amendment last year. He also touted his record fighting fentanyl and standing up for workers. Brown significantly outraised Moreno as a candidate, but outside political action committees or PACs spent millions for ads targeting the Democrat. In fact, this will set a new record with a statewide race with nearly $500 million spent. If Brown wins, he's set to become, like I said, the longest sitting U.S. Senator in Ohio history. Most of the top Democrats from around the state are expected here tonight. We've already heard from a few of them, including a congresswoman and an appeals judge. Live in Columbus, James Pilcher. Back to you, Megan and Adam.
James, thank you. Meanwhile, Local 12's Tyler Madden is with the Marino campaign and gives us an update.
This has filled in a lot over the last hours. We're seeing more of these numbers come in. This race against Marino and Brown still incredibly tight. That room filling in here, along with some heavy hitters from Ohio GOP politics. Just spoke a few minutes ago with Lieutenant Governor John Husted, along with Attorney General Dave Yost. They were both talking about what they feel resonated with voters across Ohio, the message from Marino being that outsider. They said that was what was appealing to him. They felt appealing to voters they feel throughout this entire campaign. I also asked Yost about those early numbers that saw Marino and Brown pretty close from that early vote, those first numbers that we saw come in when the polls closed at 7:30. And Yost said in talking with Marino, that was a part of that strategy here to make sure that his voters got out in these early days of early voting leading up to Election Day on Tuesday. So we're seeing this political landscape shift in that push toward that early voting. So very interesting to see that. This race still incredibly close, and we're going to keep bringing you those numbers as soon as we get them. But we're live in Westlake. Tyler Madden, Local 12 News.
Tyler, thank you for that update. Meanwhile, Congressman Greg Landsman is running for his second term. The former Cincinnati City Councilman is being challenged by Orlando Sanza. The winner will represent Ohio's first congressional district in Washington. That includes all of the city of Cincinnati, which leans Democratic, and all of Warren County, which is heavily Republican. You can see the results right here with 51% reporting. Greg Landsman with 55% of the vote, 45% for Orlando Sanza.
And Congressman Warren Davidson is facing off against Vanessa Enoch for the fourth time. Davidson was elected in a special election in 2016 and has won four full terms since then. Right now, he's ahead 60% to 40%. That is only with 6% of the precincts reporting. Now, of course, the winner of this will represent Ohio's 8th district.
In Ohio's 2nd district, the winner will replace Congressman Brad Wenstrup, who is retiring after this term. Dave Taylor is a former Claremont County assistant prosecutor. He's a Republican candidate. His opponent is Democrat Samantha Meadows. This is her second bid for Congress. Taking a look with 29% reporting, David Taylor handily up on Meadows, 71% to 29%. Well, Ohio voters are deciding on the issue of redistricting in the state. Ohio Issue 1, if passed, would put a newly formed redistricting commission in charge of drawing district lines for the State House and the Senate, as well as the U.S. House.
And you're looking at this point, no is ahead by a little bit of a margin at this point. That is, of course, is Ohio Issue 1, so the no votes are ahead at this point. To break down what this means, we're going to talk with Dr. Shauna Riley, a political science professor from NKU. And what are the implications of this redistricting vote in Ohio Issue 1?
So the proponents of Issue 1 wanted to take the politics out of the redistricting process, to remove politicians who may redistrict districts to advantage themselves and their party. And that's what they proposed. The challenge that we're seeing with voters is that it's really a complicated question because of the wording that was approved by the Secretary of State. So both sides argued that it was to stop gerrymandering, which isn't necessarily true. It was gerrymandering, which confused voters. So it's not surprising that it's that close, and I would not be surprised if it fails.
Yeah, and that controversy has been with this issue from the start, as you mentioned, and a lot of money from both sides being put into this issue. How important is this, whether it falls one way or another, how important is this in the state of Ohio for elections moving forward?
So it not only determines the state house races, but it also determines our congressional districts, right? So who draws them obviously impacts what they look like. The argument that the folks who are proposing this is that politicians shouldn't be part of the process because they're drawing the lines to advantage themselves. One of the major challenges with politics is how you draw those districts. Is it computer driven? Is it by address? Is it by shared interests? If it's by shared interests, those are probably going to overlap partisan lines. But how else do we get representation? there's lots of reasons and ways we do redistricting. No side's perfect to get what you need for representation. It's really hard to do.
Another important race is the race to see who controls the Senate between Sherrod Brown and Bernie Moreno. Republicans notched their first flip of a Senate seat with Governor Jim Justice winning the seat being vacated by the retirement of Senator Joe Manchin. That happened in West Virginia. So, of course, a lot of people are looking at this race here in our area, and Republicans are hoping to flip the seat that Sherrod Brown currently holds. What are you thinking could happen? Obviously, we read the numbers. They're very close at this point.
It's about 30 to 40,000 votes separating the two candidates. I think what's important to note is where the votes have not come in yet. So if we're looking at around Cleveland, we're looking around Cincinnati, we're looking around Toledo, those precincts are in at a lower rate than some of the other places in the state. So I don't know that Sherrod Brown is out for the count yet. Those places are more likely to have a higher percentage of Democratic votes. So I think it's wait and see on how those break.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Riley, and we appreciate you being with us all evening long and your expertise on the political landscape here, not only in the tri-state, but also throughout the nation. So thank you for joining us. Local voters lined up in record numbers to vote early this cycle, with experts also expecting a huge turnout today.
Our David Winter is helping monitor how things are going at the Hamilton County Board of Elections. Any issues up until this point, David?
Yeah, no issues here. Things are running quite smoothly, but things are starting to pop a little bit. The last time you checked in with me, we had 26% of the vote. That 26% represented the early vote and also the absentee. Well, now, if you take a look over at the big board here, you can see we have 42 of the 562 precincts reporting. And those numbers represent about 7% of the precincts. And what we're seeing is a slight tightening of the races. At first, for instance, Melissa Powers for prosecutor, she was losing 41 to 58% to Connie Pillich. Well, now that's down to 43 to 56, and Charmaine McGuffey was ahead 63 to 37 over Jim Neal. Now that's down to 61 to 38. Take a listen to how the process works. Wave is the early voting, and that's been going on for the past month or so. People showing up to their boards of election and sending in their absentee ballots. The second wave is coming in right now. Those are those ballots that you just saw. That's about 30 cars from the Board of Elections spreading out across the county and picking up thumb drives from polling places and then bringing them back and plugging them into tabulating computers here. And then the third wave is explained by the Deputy Director of the Hamilton County Board of Elections.
So the poll workers have to pack up. They have to perform something called ballot accounting to make sure that the number of ballots matches the number of voters checked in. Once they've done that, they take all of their equipment to a rendezvous point where they load it up onto a truck. There are 25 trucks scattered throughout Hamilton County. Once a truck has all of the equipment from all of its polling locations, it comes back here to the Board of Elections where we unpack it and take the drives out in order to begin the tabulation.
So right now, about 30% of the vote is in from Hamilton County, and we are expecting those big dumps from those trucks to come in about 10 o'clock this evening. Reporting live from the Board of Elections in Hamilton County, David Winter, back to you in the studio.
David, thank you. 1/3 of voters nationwide have already cast their ballots in the 2024 election. An AP tally shows more than 83 million early votes were cast. That's slightly more than half of the total number in the 2020 presidential election. And here are the local voter turnout numbers. It's unofficial results for everything. We're talking absentee, early vote, and election day. As David mentioned, Hamilton County is at 67%. Butler County, 72%, and Warren County is at 78%. Several local school districts are asking voters to approve levies or bond issues.
Local 12's Chelsea Sick breaks down the early preliminary results in some of those districts. We're starting to see some numbers come in, Chelsea.
Yeah, we are. Voters in the Mount Healthy School District were asked to approve an additional tax levy for operating expenses. This came after the district was put in a state of fiscal emergency earlier this year. Let's take a look at those numbers right now. So far, 55% of voters in the Mount Healthy School District are against this. 45% are for this. If this ends up getting approved, the $3 mil levy would cost property owners of a $200,000 home about $210 a year. Moving over to the Princeton School District, they were asking voters to approve money to cover operating costs. Right now, 52% are against that. 48% are for. Milford school leaders asked voters to approve a 1% earned income tax. You can see 60%. Well, actually, this is an older graphic. We have just learned 60% are against that and 40% were for. The Yes for Milford group posted on Facebook accepting defeat this evening. They said, quote, "While this wasn't the outcome we hoped for, our dedication to Milford students remains stronger than ever." The Wyoming schools have a bond issue on the ballot. District leaders say if it passed, it would have raised $72.5 million for 3 new primary schools. You see right now 68% are for that. The Monroe schools also have a bond issue on the ballot to build a new high school. So far, 59% are for that bond issue. Adam, Megan, these are early numbers. We will have another update on these levies and bond issues on Star 64 at 10.
Chelsea, thank you. This election cycle has seen record early voting turnout. More than 81 million Americans cast their ballots before Election Day.
Officials in every state have extremely busy schedules working to ensure this year's election is the most secure ever, and that includes at polling locations. The U.S. Secret Service has put up an anti-scaling fence, a ring of steel surrounding the White House. It's 8 feet tall. Similar measures are at both candidates' election night headquarters. That's in addition to platoons of tactical teams, drones, and counter surveillance technology. Dozens of National Guardsmen will deploy in at least 6 states, plus Washington, D.C. Hundreds more on standby. Online, the white supremacist group, the Proud Boys, have warned that they're locked and loaded and ready for treasonous voter fraud. Meanwhile, the Russian-backed disinformation firestorm continues, with U.S. intelligence officials warning late last night that Moscow is manufacturing fake news stories and laundering them across social media platforms.
U.S. Capitol Police say they arrested a man who was trying to enter the Capitol Visitor Center. They say he smelled like fuel and had a torch and a flare gun. According to CNN, he also had 2 containers with contents that smelled like gasoline and a notebook, which he told officers he wanted to get to Congress. The visitor center was closed for the day.
And tonight, you could use local12.com to track the votes. You can see them from every state, how they're impacting the count or the balance of power in the Senate and the House. Just look at the election section of Local 12. And of course, we have team coverage. As you saw, a team of 8 reporters are targeting all of the key races. That's all the time for right now.
Yeah, thanks for being with us here this evening. And be sure to tune into our election coverage on air beginning in just a few minutes at 9:25 and then again at 9:55. Have a good night.